If one of the government's ideas was to scare the public with the far-reaching recommendations in the Commission of Audit, then the plan worked. Attacks on proposed welfare and pension changes have been intense, as has criticism from the government's own side on the idea of a deficit levy. Former Treasurer Peter Costello was blunt with his advice: ditch it. Federal Cabinet meets tomorrow to sign off on the budget, and then the final countdown to Budget Day begins. Political correspondent Sabra Lane reports.
Am I allowed to pick up a brick without ruining the work? Okay.
And this budget is part of the government's economic action strategy.
The end of the age of entitlement will facilitate greater personal responsibility.
Do you want a smiley cookie?
Because it will be a nation-building budget, even though it cuts spending.
This time next Tuesday, Joe Hockey will be handing down his first budget. The main themes have crystallised in recent weeks. We're told it'll signal the end of the age of entitlement and start a new age of responsibility, with the entire exercise underlined by a shared sacrifice by everyone to help the nation back into the black.
There will be heavy lifting. All of us have to contribute to that heavy lifting.
It's understood more mutual obligation measures will be introduced for everything from paid parental leave to those on welfare payments. For example, with school leavers, they'll be told that they have to earn or learn.
I don't like the concept of earn or learn if it implies that for the young people are not doing their best or they're not committed. I think it's important that we look at a job guarantee for young people, training to at least Certificate 3 or Certificate 4 level, and also a wage subsidy or a job guarantee so that the young person gets a real job, not make work.
The government is trying to even out the pain. It's conscious low and middle income families are being asked to carry a large burden. That's why high income earners are also in its sights with the temporary deficit levy. The Welfare Rights Network's Maria O'Halloran has other permanent fixes.
There's very unfair superannuation expenditures that happen and unfair tax concessions. The use of discretionary trusts, so many high-income earners don't actually pay tax. There are a whole lot of revenue-raising areas that need to be looked at.
The options for targeting high-income earners are limited. 730 has been told the government can either impose a temporary deficit tax on them or that it can change taxation arrangements on superannuation. But Mr Abbott gave a solemn commitment there would be no adverse changes on superannuation within his first term. So that means Cabinet's effectively got one unpalatable choice before it.
My view is very similar to Milton Friedman's dictum that there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So I think this temporary program, this temporary tax, is going to be with us for quite some time.
Cabinet hasn't signed off on it yet. It meets tomorrow. It's expected to agree to most of the budget, though it won't go to the printers until the weekend. If it agrees to the levy, it'll argue it's not a broken promise as it's temporary, and that its fundamental commitment was to repair the budget. The levy has few friends inside Cabinet, and outside it's been dubbed a great big new tax. Sinclair Davidson is a professor of economics at Melbourne's RMIT.
Without a doubt in my mind whatsoever, this is a broken promise. Mr Abbott promised before the election, he gave absolute assurances that the tax burden would be lower under a coalition government than what it was under the Labor government. This is his moment that Ms Gillard had when she stared down the camera and said, there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead. This is exactly what Mr Abbott is doing. Ms Gillard never survived from that moment, and I think Mr Abbott faces that same problem. Politically, it is a disaster for him.
The former Federal Treasurer, Peter Costello, is also a critic. He's declined to go on camera, but in his newspaper column, he's scathing. He says the proposed tax levy has no economic benefit. It will detract from growth by reducing consumption. The levy, talk of slashing family payments and changing pensions, are believed to be behind a poll slump for the coalition in today's news poll. On a two-party preferred basis, the government's vote has dropped 4 points to 47%. Labor's up to 53%, and that's before the entire budget pane is unveiled.
Polls will come and go. The ship of state, which is the Australian government, will keep ploughing through these choppy waters, and I think will come through the other side in a sound condition.
This budget is scaring the daylights out of carers, it's scaring the daylights out of pensioners, It is frustrating Australians who go to work every day.
Government figures aren't too worried by the polling, mainly because voters aren't deserting them for Labor. The primary vote results show voters are turning to the Greens and others. It's a sign of protest. They don't like either major party. Much of the budget will be about savings, but the message will be balanced by big spending on infrastructure projects as part of an economic action strategy. Remember, Tony Abbott said he wants to be known as an infrastructure Prime Minister. There'll be a substantial investment, $40 billion over 10 years, concentrated on projects from next year until 2018, when the peak phase of the mining investment boom will be over. We already know some of the plan. Money for a new second Sydney airport and Melbourne's east-west link, but there'll be more funds for big projects in Sydney, Perth and Adelaide.
There will be infrastructure projects in South Australia, and the Infrastructure Minister Warren Truss and the Prime Minister are in discussions with the Premier and his Treasurer and Transport Minister.
The Audit Commission report is the basis of some budget measures. Professor Davidson says its recommendations were modest. He'd like to see more radical ideas, like putting fiscal constraints on politicians to limit how much they can spend and borrow.
Politicians, who are the people who got us into this budget problem in the first place, should have the kind of incentives to get us out of this problem. And for example, you could have a rule whereby, while the budget is in deficit, that their salaries get cut by 50% and they remain at that level until the budget is back into surplus.
In this season of speculation, that's one idea that can safely be ruled out.
Sabra Lane reporting.